Ethan Caldwell's office on the 42nd floor of Quantum Innovations was a cathedral of control, a sleek expanse of glass and steel that seemed to float above Seattle's restless skyline, where the city's grey drizzle met the Puget Sound's restless waves. The space was as unyielding as Ethan himself, a 40-year-old tech visionary whose presence filled the room like a storm held at bay. Tall and lean, his bespoke navy suit clung to him with the precision of a second skin, absorbing light rather than reflecting it. His dark hair cropped close, his grey eyes sharp enough to cut through excuses. A single bonsai tree rested on his polished oak desk, its branches pruned with surgical care, a silent monument to his obsession with order. Ethan's employees moved through the office with the quiet precision of soldiers, aware of the invisible rules that governed their world. No tardiness, no idle chatter, no splashes of bright color to disrupt the monochrome aesthetic. Most unspoken, yet most rigid, was Ethan's aversion to women who didn't fit his narrow definition of professional: slim, understated, molded to the ideals his late mother, a corporate image consultant with a tongue as sharp as her stilettos, had ingrained in him. She'd taught him that image was power, that deviations were weaknesses, and Ethan had internalized her lessons until they were as much a part of him as his pulse. Her voice still echoed in his mind, critiquing his posture, his choices, his life, even years after her passing, leaving him with a hunger for control that kept his heart at arm's length. The office hummed with subdued ambition, but beneath it lay a tension, a collective breath held in fear of crossing Ethan's invisible line. His assistant, Margaret, a woman in her 50s with a knack for reading his moods like a weather map, sat at her desk just outside his glass-walled sanctuary, her fingers poised over the intercom. At 10:55 a.m., her voice crackled through, steady but cautious. "Mr. Caldwell, your 11 a.m. interview is here. Lena Harper, for the senior project manager role." Ethan didn't look up from his tablet, where he was dissecting quarterly projections with the focus of a surgeon. "Credentials," he said, his voice low, clipped, betraying no interest beyond the task at hand. Margaret didn't miss a beat. "Stanford grad, fluent in Spanish and Japanese, 8 years at a top tech firm, lead a team that launched a multi-million-dollar AI platform. She's overqualified, frankly." Ethan's fingers paused over the tablet, a flicker of curiosity stirring in his chest, though his face remained a mask of indifference. "Overqualified," he repeated, more to himself than to Margaret. "Send her in." He expected another predictable candidate, someone who'd slip seamlessly into the sterile ecosystem he'd built, another cog in his perfectly calibrated machine. Yet, as he straightened his cufflinks, the faintest crack appeared in his composure, a sense that this interview might not go as planned. The clock on the wall ticked toward 11 o'clock, its rhythm steady, almost mocking, as if it knew something Ethan didn't. Outside, the Seattle skyline shimmered through the drizzle, a city alive with possibility, while inside, Ethan's world was a fortress of his own making, its walls high and unyielding. He leaned back in his chair, the leather creaking softly, and glanced at the bonsai tree, its delicate branches, a reminder of the control he'd spent his life perfecting. His mother's voice whispered in his memory, "Keep it clean, Ethan. Keep it sharp. No distractions, no weaknesses." He'd followed her rules to the letter, building a life where nothing was out of place, where emotions were as tightly pruned as the bonsai before him. But as the door to his office opened, the air shifted, carrying a warmth that didn't belong in his sterile domain. Ethan didn't know it yet, but Lena Harper was about to walk into his life. Her presence, a quiet rebellion against every rule he'd ever made. Her confidence and brilliance destined to unravel the carefully constructed walls around his heart. He adjusted his tie, unaware that the next few minutes would mark the beginning of a story he couldn't control, a story that would teach him that love, not order, was the truest form of power. The glass door to Ethan Caldwell's office swung open at precisely 11 a.m., and Lena Harper stepped inside, her presence like a warm breeze cutting through the sterile chill of Quantum Innovations. She was a vision of quiet power, her emerald dress tailored to accentuate her curvy frame, defying the unspoken rules that governed Ethan's world. Her warm brown skin glowed under the soft light streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows, and her coiled hair, swept into an elegant updo, framed a face that held both strength and serenity. Lena's eyes, a deep hazel that seemed to see through facades, locked onto Ethan's as she crossed the room with a stride that was neither hurried nor hesitant. She extended a hand, her smile warm but not seeking approval, as if she already knew her worth. "Mr. Caldwell, it's an honor to meet you," she said, her voice smooth and steady, carrying a faint trace of a southern lilt that felt like sunlight. In the cold office, Ethan stood, his movements automatic, but his hand lingered a moment too long in hers, her warmth seeping into his palm like an unfamiliar current. He withdrew quickly, gesturing to the chair across his desk, his throat tightening as he muttered, "Ms. Harper, please, sit." Lena settled into the seat with effortless grace, her posture relaxed yet commanding, as if she owned the space without needing to claim it. Ethan's eyes betrayed him, flickering to the curve of her dress. The way it hugged her formed professional, yet a bold departure from the muted tones he demanded. He caught himself and forced his gaze to her resume, the pages crisp under his fingers, though he barely registered the words. "Your credentials are impressive," he said, his tone clipped, trying to anchor himself in the familiar territory of facts. "Stanford, multilingual, a track record of leading high-stakes projects. Why leave a secure role at a top firm for a project manager position here?" Lena's lips curved slightly, her eyes never leaving his. "I'm not here for security, Mr. Caldwell. I'm here for impact. Quantum innovations pushes boundaries, and I want to work where excellence isn't just a goal, it's the baseline." Her answer was direct, unflinching, and Ethan felt a jolt, not just at her words but at the way she delivered them, as if she were challenging him to match her ambition. He leaned back, his chair creaking faintly, and asked, "And what makes you think you can meet my expectations?" His voice carried the weight of his reputation, the unspoken rules that had kept his world orderly. Lena didn't blink. "I don't just meet expectations, I redefine them. I've led teams through crises, turned failing projects into industry benchmarks, and I thrive in environments where others buckle." Her confidence wasn't boastful. It was a quiet fire, and Ethan found himself caught in its glow. He scribbled a note on her resume, more to buy time than to record anything meaningful, his mind racing. She was unlike any candidate he'd ever met, not just in her qualifications but in the way. She filled the room with a presence that made his carefully curated space feel suddenly small. He asked about her experience with AI integration, probing for weaknesses. But Lena answered with precision, weaving technical expertise with a vision for innovation that left him nodding despite himself. The interview stretched beyond its allotted time, and for the first time in years, Ethan didn't mind. As Lena spoke, he noticed the way her hands moved, expressive but controlled, the way her smile flickered when she mentioned a project she was proud of, a healthcare app that had saved lives. There was a humanity in her that his office, his life, lacked, and it unsettled him. When she finished, she leaned forward slightly, her gaze steady. "Mr. Caldwell, I know your reputation for precision, for running this company like a machine. I'm here because I believe I can make that machine sing." Ethan's lips twitched, a rare, almost imperceptible smile breaking through his composure. He stood, signaling the end of the interview, but his voice softened as he said, "We'll be in touch, Ms. Harper." She rose, her movements fluid, and thanked him with a nod that felt more like a promise than a farewell. As the door closed behind her, the air in the room felt heavier, as if she'd left something behind, a challenge, a question, a spark. Ethan sat back down, staring at the bonsai tree, its rigid branches suddenly seeming less like art and more like a cage. Margaret buzzed in moments later. "Well?" she asked, her tone laced with curiosity. Ethan hesitated, then said, "She's different. Hire her. Trial basis 2 weeks." Margaret's silence on the other end spoke volumes, but Ethan didn't elaborate. He knew Lena Harper was more than a hire. She was a disruption, one that threatened to unravel the rules he'd lived by for years, and for reasons he couldn't yet name, he wasn't entirely sure he wanted to stop her. Lena Harper's first 2 weeks at Quantum Innovations unfolded like a quiet revolution, her presence rippling through Ethan Caldwell's meticulously ordered world with a warmth that both soothed and unsettled him. She arrived each morning at 7:45 a.m., her heels clicking softly on the polished floors, her outfits a subtle defiance of Ethan's monochrome preferences. Today, a deep plum blazer over a cream blouse. Tomorrow, a sapphire skirt that hugged her curves with understated elegance. Her work was flawless, not in the robotic way Ethan was used to, but with a vibrancy that made efficiency feel alive. She reorganized his chaotic project timelines, into color-coded dashboards that anticipated needs he hadn't voiced. Streamlined client communications with a clarity that won praise from even the most difficult accounts, and quietly adjusted the office thermostat to ease the chill Ethan hadn't realized bothered him. Her desk, just outside his glass-walled office, became a small oasis of personality, a potted aloe plant, a framed photo of her laughing with her younger sister at a beach, a stack of books on leadership and AI ethics. Ethan found himself glancing through the glass more often than he'd admit, drawn to the way Lena moved through tasks with a dancer's grace, her hazel eyes catching the light as she typed or took calls in fluent Japanese. She'd started leaving chamomile tea in the break room, its faint floral scent stirring a memory of his late aunt brewing it for him during childhood summers, a time before his mother's rules had hardened his heart. During briefings, Lena's insights were sharp, her suggestions bold yet practical, and Ethan began asking her to stay after meetings, her voice lingering in the room like a melody he couldn't shake. The office noticed the shifty Then's curt emails softened. His usual frown gave way to fleeting nods of approval, and once, during a tense discussion about budget cuts, he let out a low chuckle at Lena's dry quip about penny pinching algorithms. The staff whispered in the break room, speculating about the new hire who'd cracked the ice around their boss. Margaret, ever observant, watched Ethan with a raised brow, her loyalty tempered by a growing unease. One afternoon, as they left a strategy session where Lena had deftly navigated a client's pushback, Ethan found himself walking beside her down the hall, their steps in sync. "You handled that well," he said, his voice quieter than usual. Lena glanced at him, her smile teasing. "Thanks. I figured you'd have shut them down. But that's not your style, too polished for tantrums." Ethan tilted his head, intrigued. "You think you've got me figured out?" Lena's eyes sparkled with mischief. "You're all about control, Ethan, but you respect someone who can keep up." Her use of his first name caught him off guard, a breach of his unspoken protocol, yet it felt right, like a door creaking open. He stopped walking, his gaze lingering on her, the air between them charged with something he couldn't name. The moment passed, but the office buzz grew louder. Colleagues noticed Ethan seeking Lena's input on projects beyond her role, from marketing pitches to tech specs. Some called it favoritism. Others saw it as a shift in the company's pulse. Margaret cornered Ethan in his office one evening, her arms crossed. "You like her," she said bluntly, no preamble. Ethan didn't look up from his laptop, his fingers pausing mid-keystroke. "She's competent," he replied, his voice flat. Margaret snorted. "She's more than that, and you know it. She's curvy, confident, everything you've avoided, like it's a virus. Either own it, or let her go before you trip over your own rules." Ethan's jaw tightened, but he didn't argue. "She's here because she's good," he said finally, the words sounding hollow even to him. Margaret sighed, leaving him with a warning look. That night, Lena knocked on his door, a tablet in hand, her coat draped over her arm. "You forgot to approve the Q3 timeline," she said, her tone professional, but her eyes searching his. He took the tablet, their fingers brushing briefly, a spark that made him pull back. "Anything else?" he asked, his voice softer now. Lena tilted her head, her smile faint, but knowing. "You look like you're fighting something bigger than a deadline." Ethan blinked, caught off guard by her perceptiveness. "I've seen that look before," she added, stepping back. "Don't let it win." She left, her words hanging in the air like a challenge. Ethan sat alone, the city lights glittering beyond his window, his mind replaying her voice, her presence, the way she seemed to see through his armor. He wasn't just drawn to her, he was unraveling, and the realization both thrilled and terrified him. Lena Harper wasn't just a colleague. She was a mirror, reflecting a version of himself he'd buried long ago, and he wasn't sure he could keep her at a distance much longer. The air in quantum innovations crackled with tension as a critical project teetered on the edge of collapse. A high-stakes product launch that Ethan Caldwell had staked his reputation on, now threatened by a supplier's sudden withdrawal. The office, usually a hum of controlled efficiency, buzzed with frantic energy, emails flying, voices sharp with blame. Ethan stood at the head of the boardroom, his navy suit immaculate but his jaw tight, his grey eyes scanning the team with a coldness that silenced the room. He'd spent years building this company into a beacon of innovation, and now, with investors watching and deadlines looming, the failure felt like a personal betrayal. Lena Harper sat across the table, her hazel eyes steady as she typed notes, her calm a stark contrast to the room's panic. Ethan barked orders, his voice cutting through the noise, but the solutions offered rushed workarounds. Budget cuts only deepened his frustration. He excused himself mid-meeting, striding toward the executive lounge, his temples throbbing, his control slipping like sand through his fingers. Lena followed, her heels a soft echo behind him, unnoticed until she appeared at his side, holding a bottle of water. "You're running on fumes," she said, her voice gentle but firm. "Try this instead of another espresso." Ethan took the bottle, his fingers brushing hers, the brief contact grounding him in a way he didn't expect. He muttered something about caffeine being fine, but Lena shook her head. "Breathe, Ethan, in through the nose, out through the mouth." She demonstrated, her chest rising and falling with a rhythm that felt like a lifeline. He stared, then followed her lead, the knot in his chest loosening with each exhale. "How do you do that?" he asked, his voice softer, almost vulnerable. "Stay so calm when everything's falling apart." Lena's smile was small, thoughtful, her eyes tracing the lines of his face. "I learned early," she said. "Growing up, mixed race, walking into rooms where I was the only one who looked like me, I had to be my own anchor. You either crumble or you stand taller." Her words landed like a quiet truth, peeling back a layer of Ethan's armor. He looked at her, really looked, seeing not just the woman who'd disrupted his office, but someone who'd built her. Strength from battles he'd never had to fight. The lounge was silent, the hum of the office distant, and for a moment it was just them, the air heavy with unspoken understanding. Later that night, they stayed late, the office emptying as the Seattle skyline turned a deep indigo. Lena sat on a couch in the corner of Ethan's office, her shoes tucked beneath her, a laptop balanced on her knees as she reworked the project plan. Ethan sat nearby, reviewing her revisions, but his eyes kept drifting to Hertha, where her curls escaped her updo, the way her fingers danced across the keys with purpose. "Why did you really leave your last job?" he asked suddenly, the question slipping out before he could stop it. Lena paused, her fingers stilling, then met his gaze. The real answer: "My boss, brilliant as he was, told me my resume was perfect, but my look wasn't right for the brand." He didn't say it outright, but I knew what he meant to Curvy. "Too black." To me. Ethan flinched, the words hitting like a slap. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "And you still walked into my office, knowing my reputation?" Lena nodded, her voice steady. "I did. I wanted to challenge men like you, to see if you'd surprise me." Her honesty was a blade, sharp and clean, cutting through the walls he'd built. A beat of silence stretched between them, charged with something raw, electric. "You've surprised me," she added, her voice barely above a whisper, her eyes holding his with an intensity that made his breath catch. Ethan stood, pacing a few steps, his hands in his pockets as he wrestled with the storm inside him. "Lena," he started, his voice low, "I don't know what this is. It's not professional." She nodded, rising to her feet, her movements deliberate. "No, it's not. And it's not what I planned either." She stepped closer, her gaze unwavering. "You're not the man who should want someone like me, Ethan. But maybe you're not that man anymore." Her words hung in the air, a challenge and a truth he couldn't deny. She picked up her bag, her coat, and walked toward the door, pausing to look back. "Don't let fear write your story," she said, then left, the click of the door echoing in the silence. Ethan stood frozen, the city lights glittering outside, his mind a tangle of her words, her presence, the way she'd seen through him. The morning after Lena Harper's quiet exit from his office, Ethan Caldwell arrived at Quantum Innovations to find her desk empty, the aloe plant still, the photo of her and her sister gone, replaced by a single folded note tucked beneath a pen. His heart lurched as he opened it, her neat handwriting slicing through his composure. "Ethan, this isn't just professional anymore, and we both know it. I'm stepping back before we cross a line we can't undo. Thank you for the opportunity. Lena, the words landed like a stone in still water, ripples of panic spreading through him. He stood frozen, the note trembling in his hand, the office's sterile hum amplifying the absence of her warmth. Lena's desk, once a small beacon of life, now felt like a wound, and Ethan's carefully constructed world seemed to tilt. He sank into his chair, the Seattle skyline beyond his window a blur of gray. Her final words, "Don't let fear write your story," echoing in his mind like a taunt. He tried to dive into work, approving budgets, firing off emails, but his focus frayed, his usual precision dulled by a hollow ache he couldn't name. The office noticed the shift. Ethan's responses grew clipped, his patience thin, his gaze lingering on the empty desk outside his glass walls. Meetings dragged, his voice sharper than necessary, snapping at a junior analyst for a minor error, a far cry from the softened demeanor Lena had coaxed from him. Margaret watched from her station, her eyes narrowing with concern. By Friday, she'd had enough. She marched into his office, closing the door with a deliberate click. "You let her walk," she said, her voice low but cutting. Ethan didn't look up from his laptop, pretending to review a spreadsheet. "She quit," he said flatly. Margaret leaned against the desk, undeterred. "She broke your rules, Ethan, and not the ones on your stupid list. She broke you, and that's what you needed." He snapped the laptop shut, his jaw tight, but his eyes betrayed a flicker of pain. "She was a distraction," he said, the words tasting like a lie. Margaret shook her head. "She was the best thing you didn't see coming. Fix this before you lose more than a project manager." She left him alone, the silence heavier than ever, her words sinking into the cracks Lena had left in his armor. That night, Ethan sat in his waterfront condo, the city's lights glittering like a restless sea, a glass of bourbon untouched on the table. He scrolled through Lena's LinkedIn, her profile a quiet testament to her Brilliance Awards projects, a recent post about speaking at a Women in Tech Summit in Seattle. His heart skipped as he clicked the event link, the date looming tomorrow. Evening, he didn't sleep, his mind replaying every moment with Lena, her steady gaze in meetings, the chamomile tea she'd left in the break room, the way her laugh had once echoed through a late-night work session. He'd built his life on control, on his mother's rigid ideals, but Lena had shown him a different kind of strength, one that didn't need to erase softness to shine. By Saturday, he was at the summit, a sleek downtown venue buzzing with tech leaders and innovators. He stood at the back, his navy suit blending into the crowd, feeling out of place in a room alive with energy he'd long suppressed. Then Lena took the stage, a vision in a sapphire gown that flowed like liquid night, her curls loose, framing her face like a crown. Her voice was a force, steady and commanding, as she spoke about resilience. "I've walked into spaces that weren't built for me, boardrooms, industries, expectations, and I learned that belonging isn't given. You claim it, you build it, and you don't apologize for who you are." The crowd erupted in applause, but Ethan couldn't move, her words piercing the walls he'd spent years fortifying. She was radiant, not just in her beauty, but in her unapologetic existence, and he felt both pride and shame. Pride for her, shame for letting her go. After her speech, he lingered near the stage, his pulse racing as she descended, her eyes catching his in the crowd. He stepped forward, the noise of the gala fading. "Lena," he said, his voice softer than he intended. Her smile was cautious, her arms folding as she stopped a few feet away. "Mr. Caldwell, didn't expect to see you here." He swallowed, his usual composure faltering. "I owe you an apology and an offer. Director of Innovation, full authority, full benefits. You've earned it." Lena's brow arched, her gaze searching. "Is this about me, or about fixing your guilt?" Ethan stepped closer, his voice low, urgent. "It's about you. You're the best thing I didn't see coming. Lena, you've changed how I see everything." She didn't respond immediately, her eyes holding his, weighing his words. "I'll think about it," she said finally, her voice steady but soft, then turned to greet another guest, leaving Ethan with a flicker of hope and a heart full of questions. He left the gala, the city's lights brighter than before, knowing he'd laid himself bare and that Lena Harper held the power to rewrite his story, if she chose to. 6 days after the Women in Tech Summit, Ethan Caldwell sat in his office, the Seattle skyline a muted gray beyond the glass, his phone silent despite the dozens of times he'd checked it for a response from Lena Harper. Her words at the "think about it" hung in the air like a promise he couldn't pin down, and the Director of Innovation offer he'd made felt less like a victory and more like a plea. The office felt colder without her, the aloe plant's absence a quiet accusation. On her empty desk, Ethan's days dragged, his focus splintered, his usual precision dulled by the weight of what he'd lost, not just a brilliant colleague, but a woman who'd seen through his walls and dared him to be more. He buried himself in work, but every spreadsheet, every meeting, felt hollow. The memory of Lena's voice cutting through his thoughts like a melody he couldn't forget. Late on the 6th evening, a white envelope appeared on his desk, delivered by Margaret with a knowing glance. Ethan's heart leaped as he tore it open. Lena's handwriting steady and deliberate. "Ethan, I don't want a title born from guilt, or a job to fix a mistake. If I come back, it's because we're honest about work, about us. Meet me tomorrow, 10 a.m., at the Capitol Hill Community Garden. I want to know if I matter to you beyond quantum innovations." Lena. His hands tightened around the letter, her words slicing through the armor he'd rebuilt in her absence. She wasn't asking for a job. She was asking for his truth, and the realization shook him. He didn't sleep that night, pacing his condo, the city's restless lights mirroring his own turmoil. By morning, he was in Capitol Hill. The garden, a vibrant patchwork of raised beds and blooming wildflowers, alive with the hum of bees and the scent of damp earth. Lena stood near a plot of sunflowers, her hair loose in soft curls, a musk sweater over jeans, her presence grounding the chaotic beauty around her. She turned as he approached, her hazel eyes cautious but warm. "You came," she said, brushing dirt from her hands. Ethan nodded, his usual suit traded for a charcoal sweater and slacks, a rare vulnerability in his appearance. "This place matters to you," he said, gesturing to the garden. "Why?" Lena smiled faintly, leading him to a bench beneath a willow tree. "This was my grandmother's plot. She taught me to grow things, flowers, courage, myself. It's where I come when I need to remember who I am." Ethan sat beside her, the bench creaking under their weight, the air thick with the scent of lavender. "I've spent my life building boxes," he said, his voice low, raw. "Rules to keep everything in place, to keep me safe. My mother taught me that control was strength, that anything soft curves, emotions, was a weakness. But you walked in, Lena, and you broke every box I had. You made me see I was wrong." Her eyes softened, but she stayed quiet, letting him unravel. "I offered you that job because you're brilliant," he continued, "but it wasn't just that. I miss you, your mind, your fire, the way you make me want to be better. I don't just want you at Quantum. I want you in my life." Lena's gaze held his, searching, and for a moment, the garden's hum was the only sound. "Do you know why I left?" she asked finally. "Because I saw you fighting yourself, and I couldn't stay if it meant pretending we were just colleagues. I want the man who shows up, not the one who hides." Ethan reached for her hand, his fingers tentative but warm against hers. "I'm here, Lena. I'm trying to be that man." She squeezed his hand, her smile breaking through like sunlight. "Then prove it," she said softly. They started small, navigating their new reality with care, coffee dates in quiet cafes, walks along the waterfront where they talked about her childhood in Georgia, his regrets over a life ruled by his mother's voice. At Quantum, Lena returned as Director of Innovation, her presence transforming the company's culture with mentorship programs and bold inclusivity initiatives. Ethan stepped back, letting her lead, his pride in her outweighing his need for control. Months later, at a company gala under a canopy of stars on a rooftop overlooking Puget Sound, Lena stood radiant in a crimson gown, her speech about innovation drawing cheers. Ethan watched from the crowd, his heart full, and later, as the band played a slow jazz tune, he pulled her aside. "Lena," he said, his voice steady but thick with emotion, "you've rewritten my life. Marry me, and let's write the rest together." He held out a simple gold ring, no flash, just a promise. Lena's eyes shimmered, her laugh soft as she nodded. "Yes, Ethan, yes." The crowd faded as they embraced, the city's lights a quiet witness to their beginning. Back at Quantum, the company thrived, voted Seattle's best workplace, its culture now a reflection of Lena's warmth and Ethan's newfound openness. They adopted a scruffy terrier named Sage, spent Sundays cooking breakfast to jazz, and planned a future where love, not rules, defined their days.